She grabbed the cast iron skillet and swung it. They caught her anyway. 3 men in her kitchen in Atlanta. Her kitchen, the one she built from grief and her dead mother's recipes. And by the time they zip-tied her wrists and walked her out past the jollof rice still simmering on the stove, she had broken skin on one of their hands, left an elbow print on another man's jaw, and looked the man in charge directly in the eyes and told him he was going to regret this. He almost smiled. They took her to Seoul. To a mansion built for silence. To a man who hadn't tasted his own food in 3 years. Not by accident. By design. She didn't know yet what she was walking into. She didn't know yet about the chef who had been there before her. What happened to that woman is the reason this story is not what you think it is. If you're watching this right now, you already feel it. That pull. That tightness in the chest that comes when a story is about to go somewhere you didn't expect. Welcome to Afro-Korean Noir Stories TV, where culture bleeds into emotion and every story leaves a mark. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe and drop a comment below, telling us what you felt in that first scene. It helps more people find stories that actually matter. Now, let's go back to Atlanta, because it starts before the skillet. The pop-up had been her idea. 4 months of planning. A rented industrial kitchen in Westside Atlanta. Tables borrowed from a church hall 2 streets over. She called it Adai Sundays. A name that meant nothing to the food press who covered it and everything to her. Adai's was her middle name. It was what her mother called her when she was teaching her something important. When she wanted her full attention. Adai's, watch. The concept was simple. Nigerian soul food cooked with Southern technique. Egusi stew over slow-braised short rib. Suya spice rubbed into smoked brisket. Chin-chin glazed in cane syrup and black pepper, served alongside sweet potato pie because why not? Because that was who Juliet was. 2 things at once, Nigerian and Korean and Southern trained and entirely herself. And she had stopped explaining her food to people years ago and started simply feeding them. It had sold out every weekend for 3 months straight. She was happy. That's not a small thing to say. She had not been happy. Genuinely and fully, since her mother died 4 years before. But those Thursday evenings in that borrowed kitchen, with her prep team moving around her and the smell of palm oil hitting hot iron and the sound of Atlanta outside the loading dock, she was close to something. That was the night they came. She heard the back door open and didn't look up. Her prep cook Deshaun was always late on Thursdays and always came through the back because he'd lost his front door key on his 2nd week and never replaced it. "Deshaun," she said, "the suya spice needs more ginger. I already told you. Miss Juliet Park." That was not Deshaun's voice. She looked up. 3 men. Black coats. The particular stillness of people who are not there by accident. The one in front was the talker. Compact, suit-pressed razor sharp, a folder under his arm. The one on his left was muscle. Wide through the shoulders, young face, old eyes, already positioned between her and the back door. The one on his right, at the back, slightly removed from the formation. That one was in charge. You can always tell. It's not the posture, not the clothes. It's the stillness. Men who are truly dangerous don't need to broadcast it. They stand back, and they watch. And the watching itself is the message. He was watching her. Younger than she expected. Maybe 32, 33. Sharp jaw, dark coat, hair cut close on the sides. He had the face of someone who had made a decision a long time ago to feel as few things as possible, and had been very successful at it. His eyes traveled from her, face to her stove, to her prep table, to the small cooling tray by the window, the chin-chin she had made that morning, twisted with Korean technique, glazed with sesame honey and just a whisper of palm sugar. Because her mother was Nigerian and her father was Korean, and she was both of those things at once and had long since stopped treating that as a problem to be solved. The talker was already speaking. She caught the tail end of it. "Your father owes our employer a considerable debt. We have been patient. That patience has a deadline. Tonight. She set down her spoon. How much? She said. The talker smiled with only his mouth. More than this kitchen is worth. Silence. The kind that has weight. She looked at the three of them. Looked at the back door. Blocked. Looked at the front entrance into the dining room. Did the math. I would like to see the number, she said. He held out the folder. She opened it. Looked at the figure. The floor did something unusual beneath her feet. A slow, cold tilt. Her father, Park Sung-jin, who had taken the restaurant her mother built and run it into the ground one bad season at a time, one medical bill at a time, one decision made in quiet desperation at a time. She had known he owed money. She had not known how much. She had not known to whom. She closed the folder. My father, she said carefully, is not here. We know, the talker said. That's why we came to you. She looked past him, toward the front exit, toward the dining room that connected to the street. 40 covers booked tonight. 60 on the wait list. People who would arrive in 45 minutes and find the door unlocked and the kitchen empty. Then the quiet one moved. He stepped forward without warning, without announcement. The way someone moves when they own the room they're standing in, not arrogantly, just factually. He walked to her prep counter. He looked at the chin-chin. He picked one up. He ate it. Juliet watched his face. She always watched faces when people ate her food. Her mother had made it a reflex. Watch their eyes, Adaizi. That's where the truth lives. His face. It cracked. Just for a half second, just barely. A fracture in the control. In all that careful constructed distance. Something moved behind his eyes that was very old and very raw, and it was gone again so fast she almost doubted she had seen it. He looked at her. Who taught you to make this? He said. His voice was quiet. Quiet the way a held breath is quiet. My mother, she said. Another silence, different from the first. He set the chin-chin down, reached into his coat, produced a single sheet of paper and placed it on the counter beside the tray. Pack, he said. 30 minutes. He turned toward the door. That was when she ran. Not toward the back. The muscle was there, had been there the whole time, positioned exactly for this. She went left, hard and fast. Toward the front pass-through into the dining room, the route to the street, to people, to the ordinary Thursday evening world that was still out there 30 feet away. She made it 4 steps. The muscle moved faster than she expected for his size. His hand closed around her upper arm and yanked. Not clean, not controlled. She twisted hard in his grip, and her elbow connected with something on his face. She didn't look to see what. She was already pulling, already reaching for the prep counter with her free hand, fingers closing around the handle of the cast-iron skillet. Don't, the quiet one said. One word, not raised, not threatened. She didn't stop. She swung the skillet. The muscle released her to block it. Reflex, pure reflex. And she was free for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds in which she made it 2 more steps toward the pass-through before the talker caught her from the side. His arms locked around her from behind, pinning her arms to her body, lifting her off the ground. She threw her head back, connected with his chin. He grunted but didn't let go. She drove her heel into his shin, twisted her wrists against his grip, got one arm partially free and raked her nails down the back of his hand hard enough to break skin. He swore in a language she didn't recognize. His grip loosened by 1 degree. The muscle was back. He took her free wrist and wrenched it behind her back. Not brutal, controlled, the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this before and knows exactly how much force is required and uses no more, and forced her forward against the prep counter. The edge of it hit her at the hip, hard enough to hurt. She was breathing in short, sharp bursts. The skillet was on the floor somewhere behind her. The jollof rice was still on the stove, still simmering. the smell of it filling the room with a terrible normalcy. The quiet one stepped in front of her. Close now. She could see the exact stillness of his face. Not cold, not cruel, just completely controlled. He looked at her the way someone looks at a problem they expected and prepared for. Her wrist was twisted behind her back. She was pinned against her own prep counter in her own kitchen. Her hip was throbbing. She had 4 of the talker's skin cells under her thumbnail. She held the quiet one's gaze and did not look away. "You're going to hurt yourself," he said. "Then let me go," she said. He did not respond to that. He looked at her for a long moment, something working behind his eyes, something she couldn't read. And then he nodded once at the muscle. The plastic cable tie came from somewhere, the kind that pulls tight with one motion. He bound her wrists in front of her, not behind, not viciously, tight enough to hold, loose enough that her hands wouldn't lose circulation. It was a considered cruelty. The cruelty of people who plan to keep her functional. She looked down at her wrists, looked back up at him. "My father," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Did he know this would happen? That you would come here and do this?" Something moved across the quiet one's face. The second fracture she had seen in 10 minutes. Just a hairline. Just barely. "Your father," he said, made a choice. He reached into his coat, produced the sheet of paper again, the debt figure, and placed it on the counter in front of her. "This is what his choice cost," he said. "You are here to pay it." She looked at the number. She thought about her father's voice on the phone last week, cracked and small and frightened. She had asked what was wrong. He had said nothing. Nothing. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. She breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth, the way her mother had taught her when the world got too large and too fast and too much. The quiet one was still watching her. "Your name?" she said. "Tell me your name." He studied her. "Seo Jaiwan," he said. She stored it, filed it. "The way you file a fact you know you will need later. You are going to regret this," she said. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Something quieter than that. "Perhaps," he said. "But not tonight." He turned away. "Bring her," he said to the muscle. They walked her out of her own kitchen, past the jollof rice still simmering on the stove, past the chin-chin cooling on the tray, past everything she had built in 4 months from grief and inheritance, and the stubborn refusal to stop feeding people. Nobody turned off the flame. She thought about that the whole way to the car. She did not know where they were going until they were already at the airport. She sat in the back of a black SUV with her bound wrists in her lap, and the muscle beside her, and the night moving fast outside the window, and she catalogued everything. 3 men, Korean in origin by language and structure, organized, prepared, not cruel for its own sake but absolutely not concerned with her comfort. A debt with a number so large it had made the floor tilt. Her father, who had said nothing. At the airport they cut the cable tie before they entered the terminal. The muscle held her arm, not gripping, just present. Just enough pressure to communicate that running would be addressed. The talker had her passport, which she had not given him and did not know how he had. They moved through the terminal with the particular efficiency of people who had done this before, in multiple airports, through multiple checkpoints, and knew exactly what each one required. Nobody looked at her twice. That was the part that stayed with her longest. Nobody looked at her twice. On the plane, she sat between the muscle and the window and stared at the clouds and thought about her mother's recipe book, which she had not been able to grab, and felt a grief so sharp it was almost physical. Then she thought about Zara Deamini, her best friend calling from Johannesburg. 2 missed calls already on the phone they had let her keep. Because they were not afraid of her phone. Because they had thought about it and decided she couldn't do enough damage in 1 call to matter. She stared at the clouds. That, she thought, was a miscalculation. one of several she was going to find. The mansion sat at the northern edge of Seoul, behind walls and trees and a gate that opened without anyone touching it. It was large the way silence is large, precise, controlled. A house that had once been made for a family and had at some point stopped being that, converted into something that ran on efficiency instead of warmth. She was shown to a room by a woman in house staff uniform who would not meet her eyes. The door did not lock from the outside. She checked immediately, thoroughly, clean, cold, adequate. A window overlooking a garden that was probably beautiful in spring and was now just dark shapes and bare branches. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands flat on her thighs and breathed. No. Recipe book. One change of clothes from a bag someone had packed. Not her. Someone had been inside her apartment before this evening and she had not known. She sat with that for a while. Then she straightened her spine, rolled her shoulders back. There would be a kitchen. Wherever there was a man who needed to eat, there was a kitchen. And a kitchen, she thought, looking at the dark garden. A kitchen was not a prison. It was the only room in any building where she had ever held all the power. A knock at the door. Come in. A woman in house staff uniform, face professionally neutral. She carried a tray, a glass of water, a card with a short list of dietary restrictions, and at the bottom, in handwriting Juliet did not yet recognize, that angular controlled script. Make whatever you want, as long as I can taste it. She read it twice, read it a third time, as long as I can taste it. Not threatening, not arrogant. A question that didn't know how to ask itself, directly. A man who had written something honest in the 2 seconds before he could stop himself. She held the card, turned it over. She had cooked for lonely people before. She knew what that appetite looked like. Not hunger. Something older than hunger. Something was wrong with Seo Jaiwan, but she had his name. She had his handwriting. She had the memory of his face cracking. Twice, in one evening, in a kitchen in Atlanta, over food she made with her dead mother's hands. She put the card down. She was going to find every single thing that was wrong with this place, and she was going to use all of it. She was in the kitchen at 5:30 the next morning because she could not lie there anymore, and because the kitchen was the only language she fully trusted. It was a good kitchen. Professional grade. Well lit. The kind of space that tells you immediately that someone understood what a cook needs and made sure it was there. She ran her fingers along the pantry shelves, slowly, reading labels, taking inventory. Nigerian spices she had not expected to find in Seoul. Ground crayfish, uziza leaves, dried utazi, ehuru. Sitting alongside Korean staples, doenjang, gochugaru, perilla oil, sesame paste, dried anchovies. Someone had prepared for her specifically. Someone had known what she would need. She stood in the middle of that kitchen for a long time, not cooking, just breathing it in, letting the weight of it land. Then she started to cook. Something simple first, chin-chin, quieter than the pop-up version. She rolled the dough thinner, added a whisper of nutmeg the way her mother did on Sunday mornings in Lagos when she was making it for people she loved. Glazed them with honey and black sesame and a pinch of ground uziza that gave the sweetness a dark, earthy undertone. White bowl. Nothing ornamental. Choi Min, the muscle, whose name she had learned by then, carried the tray upstairs. He came back, said nothing. Set the empty bowl on the counter. Juliet looked at the bowl. Empty. She exhaled, slowly, quietly, and turned back to the stove. He could taste. Whatever that note had cost him to write, he could taste something. There was something in him that food could still reach. She just had to find out what. The dietary restrictions were designed to make him disappear. She figured it out on day 4. It started as a list of ingredients to avoid. Reasonable on the surface. Allergens, blood pressure, the usual things a doctor might prescribe. but she had been cooking for people with real dietary restrictions her whole professional life, and the longer she stared at this list, the more clearly a pattern emerged. Every ingredient that carries heat on the restriction list. Every ingredient that carries depth. Long-cooked bones, fermented pastes, aged things, smoky things. The building blocks of flavor that take time and intention. Prohibited. Every ingredient that carries memory. The spices that make food not just nourishing but meaningful, that make a bowl of soup feel like a hand on a shoulder. Gone. What they had left him was technically food, nutritionally adequate, completely, deliberately lifeless. Someone had designed a diet to keep a man alive and ensure he felt nothing while eating. Juliet stood in the pantry for a long time with the list in her hand. Then she put it down. She went to her mother's recipe book. There was a page near the back, stained yellow at the corner from the palm oil incident of 2009, when she was 12 and thought she could cook a goosey stew unsupervised. Her mother had laughed until she cried and then made her sit beside her and showed her again, slowly, the right way. The page she had started on that day was the oxtail pepper soup page. When someone needs to come back to themselves, her mother had written in the margin in Yoruba, "You make them this." Not to impress them, to remind them. Juliet made the oxtail pepper soup. The pepper base took 2 hours. By the time the broth began to reduce, the smoke from the crayfish and the uda and the ehuru had filled the entire house. A deep, layered, living smell. Nothing like the neutral meals that had come out of this kitchen for God knows how long. She heard someone stop in the hallway outside the kitchen door. She did not look up. The pause lasted almost 30 seconds. Then the footsteps continued. She added the oxtail. Let it go another hour. Tasted. Added half a teaspoon of doenjang. No more, not enough to announce itself, but enough to give the broth a slow fermented depth that bridged her mother's Lagos kitchen with something distinctly of this city, this country. A fusion nobody had asked for. She ladled it into a bowl. Carried it upstairs herself, knocked on the study door. Come in. He was at his desk, work spread across it in precise stacks. He looked up. His eyes went to the bowl. That is not on the approved list, he said. No, she said. It isn't. A silence. What is it? Oxtail pepper soup? My mother's recipe. You eat it when you have forgotten what warmth tastes like. He looked at her across the desk. That deep, attending stillness. The look of someone who had been careful for so long that being looked at directly felt like a foreign language. You are not following the dietary guidelines, he said. No, she said. I'm not. Choi Min gave you those guidelines for a reason. Choi Min gave me those guidelines at someone else's instruction, she said. And I think that someone did not have your interests in mind. The words landed. He was very still. Put it down, he said finally. She put it down. He looked at the bowl, the steam rising from it, the color of the broth, deep amber and bronze, the uziza leaves dark against the surface. He picked up the spoon. He tasted it. The heat hit him first, the long, slow building heat of the Scotch bonnet. Not sharp, not aggressive. The kind that starts at the back of the throat and moves forward gradually like a tide coming in. His eyes closed, just for a moment. Then they opened. And they were bright. Something that had been held back for a very long time was pressing against whatever wall had been built to contain it. Jaiwan, he said, not to her, to himself. He said his own name the way you say a name when you are calling someone back from very far away. Jaiwan. Then he set the spoon down and pressed his hands flat against the desk and breathed. Slowly, carefully, the way someone breathes when they are trying not to fall apart. And when he looked up, his face was open in a way she had not seen it before. Cracked. Not broken. Open. How long? She asked quietly. He understood the question. 3 years, he said. His voice was rougher than usual. Since the attempt. Before that, I tasted everything. I mean, really tasted. Food, wine, seasons, everything. He looked at the bowl. After. Nothing. Ash. Like chewing gray air. A pause. They told me it was psychological. Trauma response. They gave me the diet. Told me certain flavors would cause... He stopped. I stopped asking. She sat down across from him without being invited. Who told you that? She said. He looked at her. Who prescribed the diet? She said. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. She found the surveillance board on a Tuesday. She was not searching for it. She was looking for the laundry room. She had been wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation since Atlanta, and the household laundry staff had the day off. There was a door she had assumed was storage, not locked, just pulled to. She opened it. The room was dark and small and covered in photographs. She stood in the doorway for a long time. She knew surveillance boards. Her mother had been a journalist before she became a chef, and she had taught her daughter how to read the thread connecting one face to another, how to trace the direction of power by seeing who was in the center and who was on the perimeter. Seo Jae-won was in the center. Director Han was in the center. And between them, a web of arrows and photographs and names and dates that told a story she could not stop reading once she started. She saw her father's name. She went very still. Park Sung-jin. A photograph. Her father, older than the last time she had seen him. Thinner. Standing outside a restaurant she didn't recognize. A date from 18 months ago. An amount. A red arrow pointing from his name to Director Han's. And below her father's name, in smaller text, with a question mark beside it. Connection. Yuyama Park. Deceased. Full provenance unknown. Yuyama. Her mother's sister. Her aunt. Who had died 4 years ago in Seoul. Who she had been told died in a kitchen accident. A gas explosion. Unremarkable. Tragic. Who she had mourned and buried and stopped asking questions about because the questions never led anywhere, and grief is exhausting. She looked at the board. Yuyama Park's photograph was there, labeled not as her aunt but as CO household, personal chef, previous appointment, previous. She traced the arrows, forward and back, until her eyes landed on a small annotated note in the corner. Compound administered. Source, Director Han. Method, delivery supply contamination. The room was very cold. She stepped back into the hallway and closed the door gently, the way you close a door when you don't want whoever's inside to know you've been there. Then she went to the kitchen. Because she didn't know what else to do. Because it was the only place where her hands knew what to do without being told. She stood at the stove and she did not cook. She just stood there. Her aunt had not died in an accident. She had been the previous chef, poisoned through the supply chain. Slow-acting, cumulative, designed to look like illness. The same way someone was now trying to poison Seo Jae-won through the dietary restrictions that stripped his meals of everything that could make him well. And her father. Her father had not simply incurred a debt. He had sold her here. Not because Director Han had found her randomly. Because her father had known who she was, who her mother was, who her aunt had been, and had used that connection as currency when the debt became too large. Your own daughter. For a reduced balance. She gripped the counter. Breathed. She had 2 choices. She could run. She believed Jae-won would let her go if she asked. She had seen enough of him in 6 weeks to know that the control he wore like armor was not the same as cruelty. Or she could stay. Not because she had to. Because the surveillance board told her Director Han was not done. Because whoever had killed her aunt was still inside the syndicate, still providing the compound, still waiting for Jae-won to fail slowly and quietly without ever knowing what was happening to him. Because running from the fear had never once made the fear smaller. She opened the pantry, started cooking. She told Choi Min that night. She took him to the door and let him look. And she watched his face go very still and then very careful. You know about this board, she said. Some of it, he said. Which part don't you know? A long pause. Yuyama Park, he said finally. I suspected. I didn't have proof. He looked at the photographs. He loved her. He ate like a man who loves food, before. Afterwards, it was like watching someone lose a sense. He never said it was connected to her death. I never asked. Because you weren't sure whose side you were on. He looked at her directly. The first time he had ever looked at her like she was a person rather than a logistical variable. I was on his side, he said. I have always been on his side. I didn't know how much that was going to cost me to prove. She held his gaze. He didn't look away. Director Han is going to make another move, she said. The dietary restrictions aren't working. Jaiwan can taste again, which means the compound is being counteracted by actual nutrition. Han will escalate. Yes. I need you to tell me when and how. Yes. He said again. They stood in the hallway outside a room full of photographs and thread and the evidence of several people's worst decisions. Choi Min, she said. He waited. My aunt. Before she died. Did she know? Something passed across his face. Brief. Human. She knew she was in danger, he said. She had started to suspect. She was. He stopped. Started again. She made him eat well. She was very good. Juliet nodded. They didn't speak again that night. The delivery arrived on a Friday. A premium rice shipment. Branded. Sealed. The kind of packaging that communicates trust and quality so loudly it almost obscures the message underneath. She saw it on the counter when she came downstairs at 6 a.m. Something about it sat wrong. She stood in the doorway and looked at it and let the feeling sit. Because she had learned a long time ago that the body knows things before the mind catches up. She picked up the bag, turned it over, examined the seal. Then she put it down and went to the pantry and made coffee, and thought. The dietary restrictions had failed. Jaiwan was eating, genuinely eating, for the first time in 3 years. You could see it in him. Not softness, not vulnerability, but a kind of solidity. The return of someone who had been absent for a long time. He was present at his own table. He argued with Choi Min about things he hadn't cared about in months. 2 days ago, he had asked her what pepper soup tasted like to her personally, and she had told him, and he had listened the way someone listens when they are gathering evidence for a conclusion they're not ready to state. Director Han knew the compound wasn't working, and Director Han had been in this house 2 weeks ago, a syndicate board meeting, all smiles and deference. He had walked through the kitchen. He had noticed the pantry. She looked at the rice. She went to find Choi Min. They confirmed it by the afternoon. Choi Min had a contact, careful, trusted, expensive, who ran the kind of test that identifies trace compounds in sealed packaging. The result came back in 4 hours. Present. Low concentration. Long-acting. Cumulative. Made to look like nothing until it was too late. Juliet sat with that result for a long time. She thought about her aunt, about her father, about a room full of photographs and arrows pointing at a dead woman's name. She thought about a man who had eaten ash for 3 years and had never known why. She thought about her mother at the stove on a Sunday morning. Watch their eyes, Adayeze. That's where the truth lives. The board meeting is in 3 days, Choi Min said. I know. Director Han will be present. I know. He waited. I need to cook for all of them, she said. The invitations went out the next morning. An extended board dinner. Internal syndicate affairs to be discussed. Chef Park will present a tasting menu. Jaiwan looked at her across the kitchen island when she proposed it. Long. Careful. That deep, attending stillness when he was trying to read her fully before responding. You understand what you are proposing? He said. It was not a question. I am proposing to cook dinner, she said. You are proposing to expose a man in front of his colleagues, in his own syndicate, using a meal as the mechanism. Yes. If you are wrong, I am not wrong. He looked at her. Choi Min confirmed it, she said. The rice, the compound, the same chemical signature as the dietary restriction prescriptions, traceable to a pharmaceutical supplier that connects to a shadow company that connects to Director Han's personal holdings. She held his gaze. I am not wrong. Another silence. And if he moves against you in the room, before it is over, he won't see it coming, she said, because he doesn't believe a chef is a threat. Jaiwan was quiet for a long time. Something moved across his face, something that looked, just briefly, like the ghost of the expression she had seen the very first night in Atlanta. That crack, that fracture. But not pain this time. Something that looked like he had remembered suddenly and unexpectedly that there were people in the world worth the risk. What do you need? He said. Full access to the supply chain, verified clean ingredients, chain of custody confirmed by Choi Min personally, a kitchen I control completely from the hour before dinner until it is over. Done. And I need the board to eat everything I serve, she said. Not choose, not request. Everyone eats the same meal. He looked at her. Including the rice, he said. Including the rice, she said. Just not the rice from Friday's delivery. He was quiet. Then something crossed his face she was beginning to recognize. Relief, and something heavier than relief. The expression of a man who had spent a long time eating alone and was only now realizing he didn't have to. Okay, he said. She cooked for 7 hours. She did not think of it as a trap. She thought of it as a meal. Because food cooked with an agenda always tastes like it. You can feel it in the first bite, something withheld, something pointed, and she could not afford that. She thought of her mother. She thought of her aunt, who had stood at the same stove and made food for a man who was learning to eat again, who had understood the assignment and paid for it with her life. Not this time. She made a full tasting menu, 8 courses, Nigerian technique meeting Korean palate. Not showy, not performative, deeply intentional. Each dish a deliberate conversation between 2 food traditions that had no reason to distrust each other. The final course was rice, simple white rice, perfectly cooked, short rib braised that had been going 10 hours, a pepper sauce built on atarodo and doenjang in equal measure. A garnish of yuzu zest that cut through everything with a brightness that was almost painful. She made the rice herself, from verified stock, every grain. Alongside it, in a serving bowl placed at Director Han's end of the table, she placed the rice from Friday's delivery, unmarked, visually identical. The dinner began at 8. 12 men around a long table. Black suits, careful faces, the particular atmosphere of powerful men who trust each other as much as they trust anyone, which is to say, not at all, and with complete professionalism. Director Han sat at the far end. She served. Course by course, she watched their faces the way she always watched faces, not intrusively, just present. A chef's peripheral attention. Reading a room without making the room feel read. The food was good. She knew it without needing confirmation. But their faces confirmed it anyway. Course by course, the careful neutrality softening, incrementally. Men who had come to a board dinner leaving their armor at the table in small, unconscious pieces. That is what good food does. It doesn't ask permission. Director Han ate well. She watched him from the kitchen pass. Relaxed. Too relaxed. The particular ease of a man who believes he is the most dangerous person in the room and has nothing to fear from the meal. The rice arrived. She watched each plate set down. Watched Jaiwan receive his. Her rice. Verified. Clean. Watched the board receive theirs. The same. Watched the serving bowl placed at Han's end. The server began to portion from it. Please hold. Her voice. From the pass. 12 faces turned toward her. She walked into the dining room. First time during service. She walked to Director Han's end of the table, picked up the serving bowl, his bowl, and set it down in the center of the table. Then she placed beside it the lab report. Printed. Clean. The compound name. the concentration, the supplier chain, the connection to Han's holdings. The room was very still. She looked at Han. He was looking at her with an expression she recognized. Not anger, something colder. The expression of a man recalculating. "My aunt cooked in this house before me," she said. Her voice was steady, steadier than she expected. Her name was Yuyama Park. She worked for Mr. Seo for 2 years. She died 4 years ago of what was recorded as a gas explosion. She looked at the report. It wasn't a gas explosion. Silence. The same compound used on my aunt is in this bowl. The same supplier. The same method. Supply chain contamination. Slow acting. Cumulative. Designed to look like illness or psychological deterioration. She looked at Han. 3 years of ash. That's what you gave him. 3 years of not being able to taste his own food, at his own table, in his own house. A pause. And when that stopped working, you sent a new supply. Han looked at Jaiwan. Jaiwan was looking at the document. The silence in the room was the particular silence of men deciding very quickly which side they were standing on. Han moved. Fast. He had always seemed too smooth for fast, but he was fast. He reached inside his coat. Choi Min was faster. What happened next in that room is not her story to tell and not her world. What she will say is that when it was over, the dining room was intact. 12 men sat at a long table with one empty chair. The food was still warm. Jaiwan looked at her across the table. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He pushed the serving bowl aside and pulled her plate toward her. "Eat," he said. She picked up her spoon. They ate. The villains were handled. That is the only word for it. In that world. With the quiet efficiency of a syndicate that had, in the end, no interest in protecting a man who had been poisoning its own leader for 3 years. Director Han, his shadow partner. The rival director who had supplied the compound and believed, until the dinner, that he was insulated enough to survive exposure. And her father, Park Sung-jin, who had traded his daughter for a debt reduction with a man who had already killed one Park woman and had no intention of stopping. Her father was not handled the way the others were. He was not a powerful man, only a frightened and selfish one, and frightened, selfish people don't require the syndicate's particular brand of justice. But they require a reckoning. She called him the morning after the dinner. He answered on the first ring. He had been waiting. "Juliet." "I know," she said. "I know all of it." He was quiet. A long, terrible quiet. "She was my sister," he said finally. His voice broke the way voices break when grief has been carried alone too long. "Yuyama. I knew. I suspected. I told myself it was an accident. I told myself the debt was separate. I told myself you would be—" He stopped. "Safe," she said. He didn't answer. "You told yourself I would be safe," she said. "And it was easier than the truth. Which was that you sold me to the man who killed your wife's sister." The silence on the line was the sound of someone with nowhere left to go. She thought about her mother. Round handwriting. Sunday mornings. The way Grace Park had loved her husband even in the years when loving him was like holding something heavy with tired arms. Not regret. Just the particular exhaustion of continuing. People learn a days. Give them warm food and time. That's usually enough. "I am sending you something," she said. "Yuyama's full recipe collection, the ones she never put on the menu." A pause. She would have wanted the restaurant to have them. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "Fix the restaurant," she said. "Not for me. Not for the debt or the money or anything else. Fix it for her. Fix it for Mom." She ended the call, sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then she made coffee and watched Sol wake up through the window and let the morning be the morning. The mansion changed. Not visibly. Not in any way you could point to on a blueprint. But it changed. Some houses have a quality of pressure to them. The pressure of emptiness, of absence accumulated over years until it has weight. That pressure began to lift. It happened in small things. A bowl of fruit on the kitchen island that nobody requested but nobody removed. A window left open in the corridor that everyone had kept shut. The smell of food. Real food, food made slowly and with intention. Moving through the rooms and staying. Jaiwan started coming to the kitchen, not only to eat, to watch. He would appear in the doorway in the early evenings and lean against the frame and not speak, and she would cook and not address him, and it became, over several weeks, the most comfortable silence she had known since her mother. He asked her once what she was making. Jollof, she said. He watched. Party jollof or everyday jollof. She looked at him. You know, the difference, she said. I have been eating in this kitchen for 7 weeks, he said. I know the difference. Something in her chest did a thing it hadn't done in a long time. Party jollof, she said. The smoky kind. You need the fire. He stayed until it was done. He ate 2 bowls. Choi Min thawed. Not warm exactly. Choi Min was not constructed for warmth, and she didn't need him to be. But there is a version of loyalty that, once given, operates as its own kind of care. He started telling her things before she needed to ask. He ensured the kitchen was always stocked exactly as she needed. He began to share, in the brief, efficient way of a man who does not waste words, small things about Jaiwan. He used to cook, Choi Min said once, out of nowhere. Late after dinner, the kitchen quiet. She turned around. Mr. Seo, she said. Before, his mother taught him. She was from Jeonju. They take food seriously there. He looked at the counter. He stopped after the attempt. He said it seemed pointless when he couldn't taste anything. I think he meant something different. I think he meant it seemed dangerous, to want something that much and not be able to have it. She thought about that for a long time. She cooked for him on a Sunday. No occasion. No agenda. The sky over Seoul was doing something beautiful with the clouds. Gold and pink over the Han River. The light coming through the kitchen window at an angle that made everything look warmer than it was. She made her mother's pepper soup. Not adapted. Not fused. The exact recipe, the exact steps. Every spice measured the way Grace Park had measured them in her round handwriting in the margin of the book Juliet carried everywhere. She made it slowly. Let every step breathe. Let the smoke and the crayfish and the uda and the ehuru fill the house the way they were supposed to. She set 2 bowls in the dining room. The actual dining room. The long table and the chairs that had been empty for too long. She went to find him. He was in his study. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. Come eat, she said. It's late, he said. That's fine. He looked at her face. Whatever he saw there made him close the folder. He followed her to the dining room. He sat. He looked at the bowl. What is this? He said. My mother's recipe, she said. She only made it for people worth feeding. He looked up at her. She held his gaze and the steam rose between them, warm and honest, carrying 4 years of grief and 8 weeks of something she was still learning the name of. He picked up the spoon. He tasted it. She watched the control dissolve, not dramatically, slowly, the way something cold put into warm water dissolves, by degrees, layer by layer. His eyes were very bright. Mother, he said, just the word. Barely a word. More like a reflex. The sound a body makes when it recognizes something it thought it had lost. Then he pressed his hands flat on the table and breathed. When he looked up, his face was open. Thank you, he said. 2 words. Just 2. But they came from somewhere real, past the control and the armoring and 3 years of ash, and they landed with the full weight of everything behind them. She nodded, picked up her own spoon. They ate together in the warm quiet of the room, the steam rising between them like something that had decided on its own to stay. The wedding. They married on a Saturday in May. Not large, not small either. Syndicates have their protocols, and Jaiwan was not a man who could marry without his world being present. But they had negotiated, in the months before, what it would look and feel like, and what they agreed on was this. It would be honest. The ceremony blended without apology. African and Korean, wrapped around each other the way their food had been from the beginning. Not one overtaking the other, not one explaining itself to the other, just two things that had decided to exist in the same space and found the space was better for it. There were flowers Juliet had chosen from a market her mother used to love, music that would have made Grace Park cry, a reception table covered in food, jollof rice and teok and pepper soup and japchae and puff puff and hotok and everything in between. All of it made by Juliet's hands and the hands of the kitchen staff she had trained in a kitchen she had finally, fully, made her own. Zara arrived 3 hours before the ceremony in a bright orange coat. She walked through the mansion door and looked at the flowers and the food and the warm light coming through windows that were no longer keeping the cold in. And she looked at Juliet, and her eyes went watery. "It doesn't smell cold anymore," she said. Juliet hugged her for a long time. "Your mother," Zara said into her shoulder. "I know," Juliet said. She would have asked him 300 questions about his childhood and told me he had good eyes. Zara pulled back, looked at her. "Does he?" she said. Juliet thought about the study doorway, the kitchen evenings, party jollof and 2 bowls. Mother, barely a word, more like a reflex from somewhere very deep. "Yes," she said. Zara straightened her coat, looked around the hall. "Okay then," she said. "Let's feed everyone." The legacy. Juliet reopened her father's restaurant the following autumn. Not in Atlanta, in Seoul, a small space in Mapo, close to the Han River, on a street where deokbokki steam floated out of doorways, and someone's backyard grill smoke made the air taste like a specific kind of Saturday. She called it Yuyama's, because of the recipes, because of the collection she had sent to her father and he had sent back with a note. She would want you to have them. She always said you were the one who would understand them. On the wall, she hung a photograph. Yuyama Park in a kitchen. Not this kitchen. An earlier one. Somewhere with good light. She was laughing at something off camera. She looked like Juliet's mother. Or Juliet's mother looked like her. Or they both looked like the women they had been before the years got complicated. Beneath the photograph, a small card. Grief turned into flavor. For everyone. Her father came for the opening. Thinner, quieter than she remembered. The particular quietness of someone who had been through a reckoning and come out the other side not exactly intact, but not destroyed either. He sat at the counter and ate the first bowl she served, Yuyama's oxtail pepper soup, exactly as her aunt had written it. And he cried without embarrassment, and Juliet let him. Jaiwan came. He sat beside Park Sungjin and ate without speaking for a while, and then said, to no one in particular, "She was a remarkable cook, your sister-in-law." Her father looked at him. "Yes," he said, "she was." They didn't say anything else, but they sat together at Juliet's counter, in Juliet's restaurant, in the warm smell of palm oil and sesame and something ineffably home. And they ate together. And that was something. That evening, after the last customer left, and the staff had gone and the kitchen was quiet, Juliet stood at the stove with Jaiwan beside her. He had been coming to the kitchen most evenings for months. They had established a rhythm. He would lean against the counter and she would cook, and neither of them would speak about the fact that this, precisely this, was the best part of the day. That evening she handed him a knife. He looked at it. "My mother's recipe," she said. "The puff-puff." She said even clumsy hands can learn if they want to. He took the knife. He was, in fact, clumsy. He said nothing about it. He followed her hands and messed up the first batch, and didn't apologize, and she didn't make a point of it. By the second batch he was more confident. By the third, the kitchen smelled like a Sunday. Outside, Seoul moved and breathed and went about its complicated business. The Han River caught the city lights the way it always does, indifferent and beautiful. The restaurant sat full of the smell of two food traditions that had decided not to explain themselves to each other anymore. Juliet thought about her mother. People learn a days. Give them warm food and time. That's usually enough. She looked at the man beside her. Focused. Present. His hands learning something new. She picked up her own spoon, and she tasted the evening, and it was good. You stayed all the way to the end. And if Juliet's grief felt like something you have carried too, if Jaiwan's silence made a kind of sense, if Grace Park's voice came through in the food, then you know this channel is something different. Afro-Korean Noir Stories TV is built for people who feel deeply and want stories that feel back. Subscribe. Like this video so more people find us. Share it with someone who needs a story tonight. And leave a comment below. Tell us what you will carry from this one. We read everything. The next story is already waiting.